Public tenders. Public tenders are one of the possible ways to raise funds for the development of a company. These are bid competitions, announced by public institutions, for example offices, hospitals, universities, to select a contractor for a given task. Public tenders can be particularly attractive to companies because they are often associated with large orders and contracts for a long period of time, which ensures financial stability. In addition, winning a contract through tendering can be a kind of recommendation for a company and help build its image. In order to participate in a public tender, a company must submit a bid in which it presents its solution and price for the task. According to the regulations, these bids are then analyzed in terms of their merits and finances to select the contractor. However, it is worth remembering that participation in public tenders requires companies to fill out a lot of paperwork and meet a number of requirements, such as those related to qualifications, experience, the quality of the services offered, or relevant documents. Entrepreneurs who want to use public tenders as a source of funding must therefore prepare for complicated procedures and competition with other bidders. What a typical public tender procedure looks like. The typical public tender procedure consists of the following stages. Tender announcement. The announcement is published in the manner prescribed by the Public Procurement Law and contains basic information about the subject of the contract, the deadline for submitting tenders, requirements for contractors, tender evaluation criteria, etc. Submission of tenders. Contractors submit tenders, which must meet the requirements specified in the announcement. Tenders are usually submitted in writing, and must be submitted before the deadline for submission of tenders. Evaluation of tenders. The tender committee evaluates the submitted tenders, taking into account the criteria specified in the announcement. The Commission may select the most advantageous bid or decide to cancel the procedure. Bid selection. After evaluating the bids and conducting possible negotiations with the contractors, the tender committee selects the most advantageous bid and informs the contractors of the results. Signing of the contract. The contractor whose bid was selected signs a contract with the contracting authority and begins the execution of the contract. The public tender procedure may vary depending on the type of contract, contract value, and other circumstances. How to prepare a bid for a public tender. Preparing a good bid for a public tender requires, first of all, a thorough understanding of the announcement and the contract specifications. Here are some tips on how to prepare a good bid. Read the contents of the announcement and the contract specifications carefully. Make sure that you meet all the requirements and that you have the necessary experience and qualifications for the order. Prepare precise documentation. Describe your bid in detail, taking into account all the requirements specified by the contracting authority. Prepare a realistic price offer taking into account all the costs you will have to incur to complete the order, but also be competitive in price. Take advantage of your experience. Present in your bid your references and experience in carrying out similar orders. Take into account possible legal issues. Make sure your bid complies with current regulations and legal and technical requirements. Pay attention to the form of the bid. The bid should be prepared in a clear and legible manner. Submission of the bid. The bid must be submitted at the time and place specified by the contracting authority. Preparing a bid well takes time and accuracy, but can pay big dividends in winning a public tender. Other formalities and requirements. In addition to preparing a good bid, there are other formalities and requirements that must be met in the process of bidding for a public contract. Here are some of them. Payment of a bid bond. Often contracting authorities require payment of a bid bond as security in case the contractor fails to perform the contract. The amount of the deposit is specified in the contract notice and can range from a few to several tens of % of the contract value. Obtaining references. Contracting authorities may require references confirming the contractor's experience in executing similar contracts. Obtaining certificates. Depending on the type of contract, contracting authorities may require certificates or other documents confirming compliance with certain requirements. Liability insurance. Contractors bidding for public contracts must have liability insurance for damages caused during contract performance. Registration with the National Court Register. For certain public contracts, contractors must have a registration with the National Court Register. Submission of an affidavit of non-affiliation. Contractors must submit an affidavit that they have no personal or capital ties with the contracting authority or other contractors. Note that formal requirements may vary depending on the type of contract and the value of the contract. These requirements should always be carefully checked and met to avoid rejection of a bid on formal grounds. Can startup companies participate in tenders? Startup companies have the same right as other companies to participate in public tenders. Public procurement regulations stipulate that all contractors who meet the conditions specified in the contract announcement can participate in the tender. However, in the case of new companies, there may be difficulties in obtaining the necessary documents and references, which are often required by the contracting authority. New companies may not yet have much experience in performing similar contracts, which may affect their position in the ranking of bids. However, it is worth remembering that contracting authorities may not discriminate against contractors based on their date of establishment or size. Contractors bidding for public contracts should carefully read the requirements set forth in the announcement and try to prepare their bids as best as possible to increase their chances of winning.